So, thank you all for coming, and hello, welcome to Rockland, and thank you for negotiating the roadworks. It seems that every time I come here I have to take a different route, so yeah, I'm sure you're all sick to the teeth of that as well. But yes, so my name is Ben Lewis. I am, officially, my title is Sutton Fen Warden, but I have recently been given more land to manage, so I'm now Sutton Fen, Catfield Fen, Strumshaw Fen and Surlingham Marshes. So that's my my patch really that I have the habitat to manage. So today we're just going to go through a few things. It's going to be hopefully nice and easy, not too in depth, but I just want to tell you a bit really about the RSPB in the Broads. A little tiny bit of history of Strumshaw Fen, you know, how the fens have really developed over the years. A bit about habitat management, and that's going to kind of be the main focus of today really, is how we manage the reserves and why we manage the reserves as well, which are sort of fundamental for us being here. A little bit about species of interest and then the future.
Would you like the lights or what?
It's up to people. It might be,
Down a bit?
yeah. So, as is fairly customary when you do a talk these days, it seems, you've got to embarrass yourself with a photo. So this is me, age 6, with my binoculars on the Thames estuary. A little bit early for my Webb's counts there, but it wasn't that long after that I started to count birds officially for the BTO, and that's where I cut my teeth on the birding. So I have been into birds and wildlife all my life, so it's an absolute joy to be, you know, somewhere like this, and it's an amazing place, and there's some amazing wildlife here, so we're all very lucky to live within it. You don't have to go far away for very long to kind of want to be coming back here. So it's a fantastic place. I'm very, very lucky to have been here. And I've been here for 15 years now with the RSPB, based at Strumshaw Fen, but as I said, I've sort of moved within the area as well. So it's long enough to sort of know what's going on, but not too much, not like the people that have been here for a long, long time. So reserve locations. So most people know about some of the sort of bigger reserves, some of the honeypot reserves in particular, you know, Strumshaw Fen, people know about that. So Strumshaw Fen is this little bit here, which is then exploded here as well. Can you see that? Is that sharp or not? Yeah, okay. So we are currently in Rockland, we're down here. So you can see that actually the Mid Yare Reserve, as we call the Mid Yare Reserve, which is these components here, forms wet grassland at Buckenham and Cantley, and Strumshaw Meadows, then Strumshaw Fen, and on this side of the river we've also got Surlingham Church Marsh, which is, hopefully most of you know that area, sort of the main visitor area for this side of the river. But we actually also manage quite a large amount of land this side of the river as well. And unfortunately there's no access. It's because you can't stand up very easily in a lot of it, and those bits you can stand up in, it's just mud and fen. Fantastic habitat, but not great for people, unfortunately. So on this map you can see this is the areas that we actually manage in the Broads area, as we call it. So you've got the same there, and then you've got Burney Marshes, which is this big expanse of wet grassland here, and then up here we've got Sutton Fen and Catfield Fen as well. So yeah, we manage sort of 9 distinct reserves really in the Broads. And in total it's 2,008 hectares, which is, as it says up there, 3,752 football pitches, roughly, give or take. So it's a massive area that we've got to manage with, you know, relatively few people. So we need to be really focused about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that's one of the key key things that certainly everything has got so much more expensive. You go to the grocery shop and it's twice as much as it was 10 years ago. It's exactly the same, unfortunately, for us. A piece of wood is twice as much as it used to be. So we have to think about everything, especially with that massive area as well. However, we do well, and hopefully you will agree when we find that out. So I've kind of already said a bit about this. For some reason my laptop is not changing. So in this area we've got mostly fen, reed bed, wet grassland, estuary and carr woodland, and they're kind of the absolute bones of what the Broads has to offer. Strumshaw is the main honeypot, so I'll be honest, because we charge money to go into there, that's where we want people to visit. It also means that we can put all of our efforts into that area and provide, or try to provide, a footpath that people can walk on. Doesn't always work. The river often has other ideas, as I'm sure you're very much aware. And that's where our trails, hides, toilets are. So a lot of people that come to this area know about Strumshaw Fen. On this side of the river, Surlingham Church Marsh is probably our sort of main place that we would send people, because it's actually got a trail all the way round it, and a pub as well, which is always handy. Buckenham and Cantley are fantastic reserves. I probably saw quite a few of you at Christmas when we went to Buckenham well, we tried to see the rook roost, but it had other ideas that night and it just rained. But we saw a few things there, and Buckenham is an amazing reserve, fantastic for waders and wildfowl in particular. Burney Marshes, so that was the one that was sort of up over towards Yarmouth, is a vast reserve. It's very difficult to sort of bird watch there because it's so big, it's so massive, and it takes 5 of us to do the Webb's count on there alone. So to count all the birds in one morning, it takes 5 of us, or usually 10 of us because we go in pairs. Yeah, really important estuary for birds in particular. Sutton Fen, close to the public. And there you really can't stand up if you step off the banks. So we'll have a look at that in a short while as well. So each of these reserves has their own special habitats and special management practices for different species. So that is kind of our main focus. But let's rewind and go back in time. Oh, I've changed on here and it hasn't changed there. Come on. Sorry. I've broken it. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know, it's just not.
What's the link?
It's not changing. How funny.
Curse of technology.
Yeah. I'll turn it off and on again. Sorry, bear with me. Just as I said, we'll go back in time. It heard me. There we go. There we go. So the history of Strumshaw Fen. I say Strumshaw Fen in particular, but actually it's very similar on this side of the river, and Surlingham's history is very much similar to Strumshaw's. But it all started around 12,000 years ago when the sort of post-glacial habitat that we had was colonised by woodland, and the woodland was immense. You know, it was an incredible woodland, but as it died, it created an amazing layer of peat, up to 12 metres deep at Strumshaw in places, which is an incredible depth, and it makes building anything on it impossible. So the woodland was cleared by about 1200 AD for use on fuel and just generally just used. And in the wake of the woodland being cleared, fen habitats started to appear, and it's the same as what we do today. If you clear an area of woodland, the best bits of fen come back, and they are really good. So what people did back in 1200 was essentially make way for these fen environments to come up. By 1900, reed cutting and sedge cutting was a big business. At Strumshaw in particular, there was a crossing keeper, there were various stores, there were wherries going backwards and forwards onto the river all the time. It was a massive, massive area, real commercial hub. The railway had to have a full-time crossing keeper because so many sort of deliveries went over the tracks. But then the railway obviously killed the wherry business in some ways, because everything went by train instead. Anyway, the world wars happened, and everyone went to war, and the fen became very, very scrubby, and the woodland started to grow up. So then in 1975, Martin George, who was the big house at Strumshaw Fen, he was out there with his silky saw trying to cut down all this scrub, and the landowners said to him, "Would you like to manage all this land? You seem to be quite keen on it." And he sort of looked at him and said, "I couldn't possibly manage all this land, but I think I know an organisation that might be interested." So in 1975, RSPB came along, and that's 76 was when it opened, so it's 50 years ago this year that we have been there. And quite a lot has changed over that time. You can very, very poorly see that, but that was the cottage where we've got somebody in here who recently moved out. This is the cottage, and that's the reception, and you can see it looks quite different. But what looks more different is the Broad. So back in 1975 or shortly afterwards, the river was completely connected to the whole of Strumshaw Fen, which meant that the water came up and down every day. And this is the view from the reception height. I'm not entirely sure if it actually is 1975, but it's thereabouts. And these are all nettles. So it's all nettles, and it's all very, very dry banks. And a massive mud pumping exercise was undertaken to turn it back into the big Broad that you can see there. And that is one of the traditional Broads. So as it says, it was dug in 1200 to 1400 AD, and it's, you know, a very, very deep Broad. Unfortunately, it's a lot of sediment in there. We kind of need to do what Mike Blackburn did back in 1975 and mud pump it again. But I don't think Natural England would let us do that now, and it would cost several £1 million now, whereas back then it was very expensive, but probably about £50,000, which was a lot of money back then. But yeah, you can see that a lot has changed, and we take on board what the previous management used to be, and try and better it for nature. So we still do the reed cutting, we still do the fen cutting, and we try to get the best out of the reeds. So in doing that, we have to follow these guidelines. These are the golden rules of fen and reed bed management. So water quality needs to be good, and that's incredibly difficult on this river, as I'm sure you all know. Water levels. The water levels need to be just right, so that it's wet enough for birds like bitterns to come in, but then dry enough for waders, and dry enough for the more wading species. And also it's very important for certain flora that we have. Plants like milk parsley, which are the swallowtail food plant, will only grow in certain levels as well with good water quality. The rotational cutting of reed, that's required to stop succession, and succession is basically what an area wants to become. So if you leave an area to go wild, the reed bed will get old, it will fall in on itself, and before long you'll have willows and alders coming in, and then you'll have a woodland or alder carr rather than a reed bed. So rotational cutting is really important as well. Scrub clearance is also fundamental, as we saw from that picture, that the scrub just comes in so quickly. It's really interesting how in the Yare Valley, willow seems to be the pest species. So willows grow really quickly if you stop managing an area. Whereas up on the River Ant at Sutton Fen, it's alders, and alders seem to really grow massively. So it's not a one-size-fits-all for any of this, and fen management it's a bit of a dark art really, because you never know quite what you're going to get until you do something and look back at it and think, well, has that worked or not? So stopping succession is the main reason that we are here. We are here to keep reed beds, and fens. And that's the next slide, I think, what the difference is between them. So it is an odd one that we are here to stop a natural process actually happening. But the reason for that is because the reed bed birds actually need reed beds. So if we let the scrub up, we're going to lose the bitterns, we're going to lose the marsh harriers and all the warblers that like those big reed beds. So that's the main reason, really, we are here. A question I get asked a lot is, what is the difference between reed bed and fen? And it's actually quite difficult to answer that question easily. It's even more difficult with those pictures with that quality, unfortunately. But we know what a reed bed is, right? It's pretty solid reed. And I tend to say if something's 90–95% dominated by reed, I would call that a reed bed. Fen, on the other hand, is much more species diverse. So although you can see a lot of reed in the picture on the right, you can see through it, or at least you can on my computer. But it's if you were to put a 1 metre quadrat down on a reed bed, it would be reed. If you put a 1 metre quadrat down on fen, you'd be there counting all the different species within it. So much more diverse in flora, and then with the floristic diversity would come the invertebrates and everything else as well. So both have their place, and luckily both have certain species that really need that habitat. And that's the same with birds, moths, other invertebrates, whatever you want to talk about. So I did look up, when I first came to Strumshaw, so 15 years ago when I had my interview, I thought, what is fen? I better look this up, and gave it a quick Google, and I was more confused, I think, after looking at it, because there were 5 different variations of what the answer was. But all of them said reed versus more floristic diversity. So yeah, there's a bit of a sort of a winter and a summer look at Strumshaw. So this is the River Yare. And this is Surlingham Marshes. I think that's actually the border of Wheat Fen there as well. And this is the river, and this is our main footpath. And I've got many photos of me or my knees up completely in water, standing on the footpath, counting fish on the footpaths, which, yeah, it's difficult, and for anyone that regularly goes along this stretch of river, it's getting worse. It's getting much worse. I can see that in 15 years. I'm dreading 15 years from now, because it's going to be a real tough challenge, this, and to keep footpaths next to rivers, next to this river, is going to be a nightmare, I think. And then the water quality then suffers because of that. So you've got the salinity from the saline incursions that are coming up. So we're trying to keep these areas as freshwater ecosystems, I don't know how long that's going to be the case for. We're probably going to start managing Stromshore Fen as a brackish system in the next 20 years, I would imagine. It's already fairly brackish in places at certain times of the year. So it's one of those things. The river is the reason the fen is there. So that is the lifeblood of the fen. But it's also potentially going to be the thing that destroys it as well. Anyway, that's a bit depressing. We won't go there too much, but it's certainly something we're thinking about because we need to prepare for the future before it suddenly hits us. So I don't know how easily the yellow is to see on this, but this is our rotational reed cutting map, if you like. I haven't got the numbers on here, but each one of these little squares is roughly 0.2, 0.3 hectares, and each one of those has a number between 1 and 7, and it's basically cutting by numbers. So it's not painting by numbers, it's cutting by numbers. So in the first year of the 7-year rotation, we'd cut all the number 1s and then cut all the number 2s the next year. So we've done this for about 10 years now, that rotation. But I'm sort of trying to change it up a little bit. And I'm moving to this one on the right. And yeah, this is just for Stromshore, and I'll say that Stromshore is where we do our rotational reed cutting. On this side of the river, we use cattle, and there is a little bit of rotational reed cutting, and there's an area that's sort of almost left alone apart from scrub taken out. So I will concentrate on just Stromshore, just here. So the green are the plots that will be cut probably on between a 1 and a 10-year rotation. So I'm extending the time because I believe that some areas of reed bed actually need to get quite old for many of the invertebrates to really thrive. And the yellow areas on here, I would quite like to manage sort of a bit more dynamically. So I'd like almost to, I've realised that there are certain areas of the reserve that look better than others for this diversity. And with fens, you want diversity. Diversity is the spice of life, as it were. So these areas I'd like to manage really, really intensively, and dare I say it, even mash them up a bit and get it back to a bit of bare soil, so then we can get more seedlings in there and get those milk parsley plants blooming, and a real good bit of dynamic management I think is needed. And the light green areas or grey areas, I'm proposing we just don't cut for the next 15, 20 years, and just to get that real diversity of the young stuff and the old stuff together. At the moment, it feels like the whole reed bed is a Thatcher's dream, let's say. It feels a bit too nice to me. So I know I shouldn't say that. I'm friends with the reed cutters. We do have reed cutters that take thatch from here, not that whole block, every year. And they are the ones that will be taking thatch from these areas as well. So it's really important to keep the local businesses, those local reed cutters going, because it's a tough industry to be in, especially with the water levels as they are. So yeah, that's rotational reed cutting. In essence, it's fairly obvious. We cut it because it needs cutting. If we don't cut it, it gets too thick and falls in on itself and turns into scrub. In reality, again, you can't see it too clearly on this right, but you might be able to see the amount of reed that's in that picture on the ground. And it's quite challenging to cut these areas and do something with this reed. We've got so many barriers, unfortunately. We would love to turn it into briquettes or pellet it and get it used somewhere else to heat our building somewhere else. But there are so many barriers for that, but we are definitely wanting to do that. So in the end, we're piling this up or burning it, which I think burning is going to be off the table completely very, very soon. And piling it just releases nutrients, which is not necessarily what we want either. So another challenge for the future, that, and we will get to the end of it. But yeah, we want to create bittern habitat, marsh harrier habitat, crane habitat as well, and that's obviously the fundamental reason for us doing the reed cutting. Yeah. So diversity, I think, is what we're really trying to go for. And the fen, so fen, so we've got a nice swallowtail on a flag iris here. So what I didn't say was that reed is generally cut when it's dead. So if you've got lots of dead stems of reed, you cut it, the reed thrives the next year and comes back stronger. But fen, we cut that when it's still green. So we cut that in, well, depends on the breeding season, but usually in August, September and October. So if the reed is still green and you cut it, it actually knocks the reed back and lets the smaller, more delicate plants come up. So we tend to be out there cutting it, annoyingly, when it actually looks really good. And it's quite challenging to, if we're at Strumshaw in particular, where lots of people come through to see swallowtails, if we're out there cutting while they're looking for swallowtail caterpillars, it is a bit challenging. But the other good thing about doing it in the summer is that you can see where the milk parsley plants are and cut around them. The regular cutting of fen reduces the dominance as well. So at Sutton Fen, we're more advanced with that. The fen at Sutton is very, very good fen. I mean, it's been described as some of the best fen in Western Europe. So we have lots of different ways of cutting it, and we cut some areas annually, some areas biannually, and it actually comes back as really good quality fen with very little reed. Whereas here, the reed cutters cut that plot in the middle every year, and it comes back better and better reed every year. So you just can't do the same thing in two different places. You just have to listen or watch what it's doing, which is quite challenging. And again, it's all underpinned by water quality. If you've got really good water quality and good manipulation of water, and you're doing this, you're going to have really good plants and really good fen. It's getting that sorted that's the tricky part. Yeah. But we are slowly diversifying from us. So at Strumshaw, we cut 12 hectares of reed pretty much by hand with brush cutters every year. That's quite a challenge, and it's quite difficult to move all that reed that we cut from the fen surface onto the banks, even though we've got a fantastic volunteer work party team. So these are two Broads Authority machines. So on the left is a truck saw, and you can see it's a floating cutter bar. So on the front of this, there's a big cutter bar here, and that's brilliant for going round the wet areas and clearing ditches to make sure that we can move the water around the fen. And on the right is the fen harvester, and as you can see, that is best used in the winter months for reed cutting, and it's got a cutter bar on the front, and it's got a hoover basically, and it hoovers it up and into the back, and then into the back you can fit lots and lots of reed. It can then drive to the edges and then deposit the reed. And the great thing about that, we've just had one in 2 weeks ago at Strumshaw. The brilliant thing about that is that it chops it up really small, so it decomposes quite quickly and makes a lot of heat. So it's actually really good for invertebrates in the habitat piles as well. And yeah, we tried that on the fen a couple of weeks ago at Strumshaw, and we trialled it. I say trialled it because we weren't sure if it would really work, and we've got lots of nice big tussock sedges, and we don't want to harm them because they are really important for milk parsley. So we put it in a plot that had, a few in, and it passed the test really well, and it's done a fantastic cut. So I envisage just using that a little bit more, because I think the worries about the tussocks and destroying the structure actually have kind of been put to bed for me. So that's really encouraging.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Why is the tussock sedge important for the milk parsley then?
It's a good question. We don't know the full answer to it. It could be something to do with the fact that it pushes the milk parsley up out of the water and out of the sort of high nitrogen water. It could be that they're above what a Chinese water deer can reach. It could just be that is A greater tussock sedge can grow sort of almost, this big, complete habitat in themselves. And there's just something in it. It might synthesize the water, and there's something about it that they like. We haven't yet got to the bottom of it, but there's quite a big project happening this year, hopefully on several reserves, and I'm hoping to use Surlingham Church Marsh as well to see why they are so good and how we can get more milk parsley to grow. But down here they seem to be really, really important. Up at Sutton, not so much. So yeah, very, very odd. Yeah, scrub control. So as I said, scrub control on fen, really, really important. It really can go too far the wrong way very, very quickly. And the difficult thing about willows is that they spread year on year but look the same to a human eye. It's only when you look at photographs or even aerial maps that you realise that single bush has actually doubled in size in the last 5 years, but it looks the same because it just really, really slowly. So every now and then we have to go in and do some quite extreme management. This was a very extreme bit of management that happened just before I arrived, and you can see this is a bit like the truck saw. It's the same body but with a 360 on top, and this is where all of the scrub that's been cut is being put, and that's basically a big fire that it was dragging around. And this happened on Rockland Island and also on Braesdon Marsh, which is the bit next to Lackford Run, if you know it, between Brundle Marina and Lackford Run. So you can kind of see that that's where the reed is, and this is just a mud pit, and it's just real, it looked horrible. But from that, you can see that the scrub here compared to the scrub there. So this was taken quite a few years later, and actually that mashing up of all of the mud and all of the surface of the fen created the best bit of fen that we had at Strumshaw. And it got left alone, so all we do now is go in there and take the scrub out as we need to, as it comes up. But that's the kind of light bulb moment for me in particular, that we've gone in there and done some pretty severe management, mashed the surface up and left it for 12, 13 years. Milk parsley was brilliant in there. Tussock sedges are brilliant in there. So is that actually a better way of managing? Which is why those yellow blocks on that map before, I just want to sort of trial it really, because if we can mash an area up and it produces brilliant fen without us having to go in and cut it every few years, surely that's what we want to do. So yeah, that's quite an extreme bit of management though. This is more normal. This is us with chainsaws and moving bits of scrub. This is at Surlingham Church Marsh, and many of you might even recognise the cows that are in there. So this was a bit of an old photo, but whenever we do any chainsawing, the cattle come running because they love the little tender leaves on the end. So they come and help, get in the way basically. But yeah, this is Harry, who was a character, let's say. So this cow in particular thought he was a human. So when you moved the cattle, you had to pretend that he was one of you, move the cattle, and then usher him in, because he was there to help us move the other cattle. So the cattle, I really struggle with. I keep flip-flopping between whether cattle are good for fen or not. And I'm still none the wiser. I've asked so many ecologists, I've had so many different questions. But we use Highland cattle, so we graze with Highland cattle at Surlingham. So they're mostly on Surlingham marshes, so the bits sort of, well, between Coldham Hall and wheat fen, really. So that section there we graze with Highland cattle, and we also graze up at Sutton fen as well. And the great thing about Highland cows are that they don't have to come into sheds in the winter. They do have to be fed hay, but they are very hardy. They are one of the few species that can be out there, you know, in the wettish areas, and they can do quite a natural job of managing fen. So they will browse, unlike us where we cut these big squares in the fen with our brush cutters. These guys will pick at various places. So technically these should be the best. The trouble is that they also like eating the plants that we want to keep, and there's no way of stopping them from doing that unless we move them really regularly. But low intensity grazing is the best form of grazing. So it's such a difficult one. If we take them off, we'll have to do more work over there ourselves, but they're a bit of a pickle to move, and we haven't got the facilities to really do it forever, I think. And as the water's coming up, it's taking longer and longer for it to dry out enough for us to get in and graze, which then means the window for grazing is getting shorter, which means that we've then got to find dry areas for them for longer as well. And I think we're at that pivotal time where we've almost got them on sort of poor quality grassland for longer than when they're in the fen at the moment. So yeah, it's a really tough one. They can be fantastic, but like so many other things I've said tonight, it's just something we just need to really think about and work out whether it's really good or not. So probably got another 10 minutes or so, don't worry. I'll just talk about wet grassland for a bit. And this is Burney Marshes, looking particularly wet. It's sort of more wet than grassland, isn't it there? And you've got, where are we? So this is the River Yare coming in, and that's the Waveney, isn't it, I think? Is that right? Yeah. So that's the railway from Brundall to Yarmouth through there. So that's the sea there. That's Yarmouth there. So yeah, incredibly wet at certain times of the year. It's much the same as managing a fen in some ways. Water is the main thing. Water availability is key, and again, that's more and more difficult to manage. Wet features are incredibly important for the waded chicks in particular. And cattle grazing here are definitely required. So the cattle graze the grass down and make the ideal habitats for lapwings, which is sort of a very, very bowling green like grassy outlook. They like to be able to see around them to see if any predators are coming, and they will only nest if they can do that. And the great thing about cattle is that they will graze certain areas harder than others, and in the areas that they don't graze too much, where it goes rushy, that's where the snipe nest. So we've got lots and lots of cattle out there as well, which is really good. And this is an old slide, but I should really update it, to be fair. But what it says is over 450 pairs of breeding waders, which is 50% of the population of the Broads, are actually on RSPB reserves. And we haven't got a huge amount of wet grassland, but that's really good. So it means that what we do quite well on the grassland, and we probably don't blow our own trumpet enough, but that's quite a good stat, so we're quite happy with that. Unfortunately, I know it's gone down since that stat was written. We've had a few difficult years with heat and drought. So yeah, the grass is very, very important, but mud is important too. So we've got this fantastic machine called a spoil spreader, and it creates these dirty great streaks along the ground on the wet grassland. So when it's first done, it just flings the mud over here so it doesn't create a big bund alongside. And then as it wets up, you can't quite see, but this is littered with footprints from waders, and that is absolutely fundamental for lapwings to feed their youngsters, as well as redshanks as well. There's lots and lots of invertebrates within that mud, so really, really important not just to have wet features, but to have wet features that are actually wet. And that is the challenge, especially in the Broads, especially in recent years. And I think that's the reason why that stat said that we had 50% of the breeding waders on our grassland, because we make sure it's wet, whereas obviously a lot of other landowners want it to be dry so they can graze their cattle. So yeah, really, really important. I've already said that. We get extra grazing as well. So in the winter, we get extra grazing from the widgeon. And people don't think about widgeon as eating grass, but they are pretty much our winter graziers. And they get the sward nice and low for the early returning waders. And then they get the grass nice and fresh for the cattle to come on. So the cattle are only on between April and, well, October-ish, that sort of time. So they're not there when it's really, really wet. And we also need to be careful, clearly, of the cattle when there are lots of nests out there, because, you know, trampling could occur. But we try and keep most of the cattle, or the big herds of cattle, out of the good wader areas. But some cattle need to be in there to keep the habitat good. It's all about balance. That's the problem. So yeah, species of interest. This has got to be pretty high on our list, I would say. So it's the bittern. So bitterns, we kind of, well, we don't quite take for granted, but they've always been in the Broads almost, haven't they? And they were actually almost extinct, or they were extinct in the 1870s. I'm told that they were particularly tasty on the Sunday lunch, and they were called butterbump because they were so nice to eat. And there are several documents where it showed how many bitterns were caught sort of every Saturday for the Sunday lunch table, and it's staggering, really. But as always, yeah, they went extinct, but they came back in 1900, yeah. And then there were 11 boomers in 1997, but that's up to 283 in 2024. And last year we had 6 boomers in this area alone, which is phenomenal, really. I mean, bitterns are, I don't want to say it, they're doing really well. They're doing really well. And yeah, it won't be long until we hear them booming again. So we had our first grunter. Always sounds a bit harsh, but they sort of start warming up their pipes at this time of the year. So we had our first grunter last weekend at Strumpshaw. So hopefully we'll get them starting again soon. We had one on this side of the river, or we had 3 on this side of the river last year. So yeah, if you get woken up at night by them, it's a good thing. When do they boom? Usually March, April. But what time of day? Dawn and dusk mostly. But they when it gets through to sort of later in April and May, the males will boom sort of throughout the day as well. So yeah, really, really loud milk bottle sort of boom. Yeah, it's a really good sound. And marsh harriers as well. It's another classic Broads bird that we see a lot of here. And they're actually doing really well nationally as well. I remember when I first started at Strumpshaw, so 15 years ago, we were telling people that there were more pairs of golden eagle in the UK than there were marsh harriers. I don't think that's true anymore. I need to look that one up, but I'd be surprised if that was still true. But we used to have people coming into the hide and really, really excited about seeing marsh harriers because they came from areas that they weren't there. But I think marsh harriers have spread out so much, and reed beds have moved so much as well. So that sort of stands to reason. Yes, so interestingly, at Strumpshaw, they have moved away from the reed bed quite a lot. So we used to have about 15, well, we used to have 10 to 15 pairs all within the Strumpshaw-Surlingham area. And slowly, one by one, they're actually moving to the wet grassland, which is interesting. So they're now, a lot of them are breeding in the edges of the borodikes where the reed is. Unfortunately, it's probably because there's more food there, but it's the food that we've just talked about on the wet grasslands that we don't really want them to eat. So we need to try and entice them back into the fen again. And we don't really know fully why they've moved out from the reed bed. It's something we want to get them back anyway. Another species you're probably familiar with, bearded tits. So they are very up and down. Some years we can have 30 nests, and some years we can have 5 or 6 nests. So they don't like cold winters. They're right on the edge of their range here, really. So they don't particularly like cold winters, and they perish if it's really cold for a long time. Beast from the east was really catastrophic for them, and our graph just plummeted, and it still hasn't got back to the same level, which, yeah, it's quite worrying. This is one of my favourites. So cranes, they're really increasing. They're doing really well. They're now breeding at Strumshaw Fen and Sutton Fen. Some of you may have heard them. They came over here, was it last weekend? And they seem to be back in the area, probably looking for nesting sites. So we had, I think it was 6 over on Tuesday as well. So that they were in the area. So keep your ears out and keep your eyes out, because they're big and they're loud and they trumpet away. But they still favour areas that are away from people. So that they don't like getting too close to people still, apart from at Hickling for some reason. At Hickling they're in quite a big high density, so they feel safer there, I think. But here they're still finding their way in areas that you don't necessarily see too much of. In the first year I was at Sutton, I put some trail cameras out because I had some breeding and I couldn't confirm that they were actually there, so I put these out, and these are the parents trying to teach the youngster how to fly. Look at those long wings. But it's, but you know. So people told me that cranes weren't great parents, but that is pretty impressive, and they really are trying to teach that youngster how to fly. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? I saw that and just thought, wow. I think I do have one more video of them as well, which it's just. So this is at Sutton Fen, and you can see the habitat's quite different. So this is in a little woodland which leads out onto the fen. This is the chick, it's grown up a little bit more, it's got more feathering, but unfortunately it's not flapping its wings so much this time. But to have these birds back in the valley is phenomenal, and I don't know, so last year and the year before we've had successful nests at Strumshaw. And I think that's the first time they've bred successfully in the valley that we know of for centuries, really. So, yeah, nice to get them back, that's for sure. Other species, so we've got all the classic reed bed species, so kingfishers, reed warblers, grasshopper warblers, sedge warblers, lots of egrets now, cuckoos, lots of wildfowl, and lots of waders on the marshes as well. So there's all sorts of birds, as you know. Water, reed bed, just gets birds in, really. And the passage waders are probably quite, they're the most exciting at Buckenham and Cantley in particular. So when we have passage movements, that's when we get our rarities in. And that often provides a bit of excitement. I don't think this one's going to work so well, but this is a little starling murmuration. So every now and then we have the classic starling murmurations, and they can be anywhere around here. So this one was at Strumshaw, but more recently they've actually been at Churchmarsh, and in quite good number as well. Do you know how many? I haven't been to see them, but I've seen them from afar, and it looks like there must be at least 10,000 birds some nights. I'm sure there's a lot, but they don't hang around for that long. Whether they then go to Yarmouth, I don't know. But they seem to hang out there for a bit and then disappear. So swallowtails, as we've already spoken about, swallowtails are incredibly important, and it's a species that we really must we must keep it alive, basically. So it's right on the edge. We've got the Britannicus subspecies of swallowtail. It's only found here in the world, in the Broads. It's found nowhere else in the world. And like most rare things, it's rare because it foolishly only has one food plant. And what's even more foolish is the caterpillar, if it does well, eats all of the seeds from the food plant. So you can see where the ecological link has disappeared, can't you? But so this is a swallowtail, this is a swallowtail caterpillar, and this is what they do. You can see it's already eaten the flower heads off of these, and that's going to go round in a circle and eat all the flower heads, which are the parts that support the seeds. So not only does this butterfly have a really niche plant, but the plant is really fussy as well. So as we've said, the plant at Strumshaw only really grows either on tussocks or in areas that are somehow different to others, let's say. It needs that niche habitat. And we need to work out how to keep them alive. That's all I'm going to say. With sea level rise, some of the maps I've seen, it covers pretty much 95% of the known swallowtail range because they like the wetland areas. So yeah, massively important to keep this. And as I said, we've got a project this year. Well, Natural England have got a project this year which we're hoping to help out with and find out how we can conserve milk parsley, and then hopefully the knock-on will be swallowtails. We might just have to seed bomb loads of areas with thousands of milk parsley plants. We'll see what happens. They have been known to feed on a few other plant species as well, but only very rarely, I would say. And the European swallowtail could well be the final nail in the coffin for our swallowtail in some ways, because the European swallowtail is now breeding in Kent, and if that pushes forward, that likes any umbellifer. See, that's got the right idea, Don't tie it down too much. And if that comes north and interbreeds with our Britannicus, probably will be the end of our sort of Britannicus subspecies. So that won't be so good. I mean, on the plus side, we'll have swallowtails, everywhere, but I don't know, it won't be quite so special. So fen orchid. So this is a fen orchid. As orchids go, they're not my favourite. They're quite pretty. They're interesting. They're exceedingly rare. So our reserves up in the Ant Valley have got about 90% of the UK population on them. So extremely rare and needs conserving. So we manage this habitat slightly different to the other areas, and we cut it every other year, and then we leave it for 5 years, and we cut it every year, and then we leave it for 10 years. So it's got a long rotation. But fen orchids actually seem to be doing okay at the moment as well. So yeah, 10,000 or so we've got up on the Ant Valley sites. So yes, it's.
Can you transplant some down here?
I'll try and walk over them and then come to somewhere like Churchmarsh. And again, these plants have got a real niche. They need a really complex. They need the tussock sedge or the fibrous tussock sedges and a brown moss, and then they come through that. So again, it would be nice if we could just sprinkle seed, but you need to transplant the whole lot. I'm running out of time, so I won't go into this. We all know that this area is very special for so many dragonflies, moths, invertebrates. I could probably do a talk about moths for an hour, but I won't, obviously. But this area, it's absolutely phenomenal for moths. It's got I've had over 1,000 species of moth at Stromshaw Fen alone, and I'm still adding all the time. So when you compare that to the, 65 species of British butterfly, you realise actually that moths are so diverse. So yeah, we've got all of the classic species, and probably going to have more in the not too distant future as well. So this is our orchid meadow at Sutton. Well, compared to fen orchids, they're slightly more boring, and they're all southern marsh and common spotted orchids, but I think sometimes we've got up to sort of 10,000 of them there, and I haven't seen that down here before. The meadows at Stromshaw used to have quite a lot, and now we're down to tens, so it's quite refreshing to see that there are still areas that are full of orchids. Just a few more. I love bog bean. It's a fantastic plant on the left. So yeah, finally, the future. So change is happening now. Everyone in this room, I'm sure that's been in this area for long enough will know that things are changing really quickly. So we're getting much more flooding. We're getting much more drought as well, which sounds very strange to say, but winters are wetter on the river. Springs tend to be a lot drier, which is less good for the wader breeding as well. So we're having to change what we do. We've got our water level targets, and we're sort of bringing all of those up and forwards so that we've got enough water for when we need it, but then not too much for when there's too much of it. And we need to make sure that we get our spring levels ready now. You know, if we haven't got the water level now, I can't remember the last April shower that was actually in April. It's not been that way for 4 or 5 years. And we're getting warmer winters and hotter summers as well. So yeah, we've got to change with what we're given. And also now that I've got several different reserves to manage, I need to work out which ones to manage and when. So Sutton Fen, for example, flooded in, late September, early October, that sort of time. And it flooded from then until early February. So I now know I've got to do all my work up there before coming down here, because although we're very tidal down here, luckily it goes up and down, whereas up there it seems to go up and stay up for the whole time. And that's just working out these different areas and working out how to manage them. Oops. So yeah, there will be some winners to climate change, I think, in the area, and we're already seeing, you know, these guys in particular, great white egrets, cattle egrets, spoonbill, glossy ibis. As I've written, you know, that's childhood holidays to the Camargue, not Broad's Reserve, and that's all happened in the last 15 years as well. So, you know, my first great white egret at Stromshaw 10 years ago or so was quite a rarity, whereas, you know, I do lift my binoculars for them, but not in the same way. Swallowtails, as I said earlier, they could be a winner, they could be a loser. We'll see how milk parsley copes with it all. We will see different species coming and going. I think that is absolutely true, and I know that for moth species as well. Since I've been moth trapping here 15 years, there have been species that were sort of legendary, you know, mythical species, and now it's another one, and things are changing that quickly. So yeah, invertebrates are going to be difficult to predict, because there will be winners and losers, and we need to keep our eye on some of these invertebrates because they're often the unsung heroes of our fen. Unless we've got people out there surveying them, who's going to notice if a tiny little beetle goes missing? Probably won't. We might notice if these guys suddenly start turning up everywhere. Does anyone know what that one is? I know Ollie knows. It's not good. It's a Savvy's warbler. So Savvy's warblers are sort of the big version of a grasshopper warbler, really, and they sound sort of similar-ish. We've had a few in the valley over the past few years, but we might see more species like that just pushing north as well. Fen plant communities are shifting north. So last year, Natural England got in touch and said, can we transplant some of your Sutton fen, some squares of Sutton fen, up to Leighton Moss in northern England, because that's where fen will be in the next 20 years' time. So already places like Natural England are thinking, right, okay, the Broads won't be fen anymore, that will be up here, and that's quite scary when you get told that. Yeah, I've already said about the changing managements, adaptation, like the birds, like the wildlife, we will need to adapt and make it the best reserves that we can possibly do. Thank you very much. So hopefully that just sort of gave you a bit of an overview. Our reserves don't happen by accident, I think is probably the line I would say. We're lucky that they start from a good place, and we are here to make them as good as they can be for the species that we believe are right. But it doesn't just happen, unfortunately. If it just happened, there'd be lots of it. But when you go around the Broads, what you see a lot of is willow and alder carr, which is unmanaged fen, basically. It's got its place, don't get me wrong, it's got its place with birds and wildlife, but that specific habitat of reedbed and fen is extremely rare, so it then creates rare species as well. Are there any questions?
Has avian flu had an impact on your...
Yes, it has. We've had a few incidents of avian flu. I don't think it's impacted massively just yet on any of the big species that we have. We see a few pink-footed geese succumb to it, and black-headed gulls, and a few swans as well. There was a little time when we had several swans that were being reported to us, and I don't know if there were more small species. You know, a swan is a big white bird, it's obvious, whereas a little teal probably wouldn't get seen so much. But we do report them to DEFRA and get them tested. We don't always get the results back, I must admit, but we do report them. It's here. Yeah. You know, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, if you do see dead birds that look like they might have avian flu, you know, look up on the internet and there's a way of reporting it. But yeah.
You mentioned impediments to managing the reed
Yes.
for heating purposes.
Yes.
Yeah. What are those impediments?
Logistics mostly. So getting a room full of reed from the middle of a reed bed to somewhere where it can be processed is the tricky part. We've got nowhere to store it, basically, and we've got a big railway in the way, and there's no place for it to stay, and backwards and forwards with the number of cartloads that we'd need to clear the 12 hectares would completely wreck our banks. But it's something we will need to do, you know, and it's something that we are looking into. We are taking that very seriously, because ultimately, if we can't, you know, dispose of the reed in a proper way, it's just going to build up, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
sounds like a good heating material.
it is, yeah, and there are some reserves that have bigger areas. We don't. Our problem is that most of the land we own is SSI or is designated. We have no spare space for dumping stuff, and that's what we need. We need some silos. We need dumps, we need some areas that we can process, and at the moment we just don't have that. The only way of doing it really is to take out some of the good habitat for it, and that's unpopular probably. But it's yeah, as I say, it's something we really want to do. You know, we want to be green. You know, we want to do the right thing. There are some reserves that do turn it into briquettes and then heat their offices with it and sell it. So yeah, that would be good.
Any predictions for cranes in the next 10 years?
Well, yeah, I mean they're going to increase, aren't they? They've got to increase. I think they need to get a bit more confident, because there are lots and lots of pairs out there that aren't nesting in areas that look good because they're near paths, and that's why places like Sutton Fen exist, to give them somewhere for them to do their thing. You know, at Strumshaw Fen, they nest about as far away from people as they can, but realistically we could have 4 or 5 pairs at Strumshaw Fen, but we've got a footpath that goes all the way around the outside. So if you were to put a buffer zone of 50 to 100 metres, and you sort of do that round the trail, there's actually only a small percentage of the reserve that's actually suitable for them. And then you times that by the amount of land that's all around the place here as well. They will get used to it. I mean, Bittons have done it, marsh harriers have done it. You now get marsh harriers nesting stupidly close to the paths. I think cranes will follow suit because their population's rising massively. They'll need to. I hope.
Have you modelled what the future may look like, and are you planning new management?
Yes, so we haven't modelled it, but we've been shown the models from various other agencies. Actually, just next week we've got quite a big meeting about the future, basically. So we will be looking at that. Yeah, as I said, we really probably need to start looking. We have 5-year plans. We probably need to look for a 20-year plan and act now to get it right for then. So unfortunately, brackish reed beds aren't that good for anything in particular. They're sort of like a watered down version of a freshwater reed bed. But certainly the Buckingham and Cantley, if that turned more saline, we'd probably get more avocets breeding there. There would be ways of, seeing the silver lining. And I think what we want to try and do is work out, areas like Surlingham and Strumshaw, what do we need to do to get the species that we expect in 20 years' time now? If they need big trees to nest in, we need to have some big trees growing, don't we? So yeah, we're thinking about it. The models are quite scary for this area. That's the problem.
Continuing that same vein of thought, this might sound a strange question, but given the rise in the risk of severe droughts and heat waves, have you started giving any thought to what you might do if you get a wildfire situation on your reserves?
Yeah, our reserves are quite...
Because it happened in Argentina, didn't it?
It certainly happened at lots of places. I mean, was it 2 years ago? There were lots of wildfires in Norfolk, weren't there, I think?
Okay.
Sorry?
Wildfire.
Well, of course, yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, absolutely. We haven't actually got fire breaks or anything purposefully done. However, I think I've got a slide which kind of shows what I was going to say. We've got lots of ditches on the reserve, and in those ditches, they are fire breaks. No, I probably haven't got a very good slide. I suppose that one probably shows it best, but you can see that there's lots of that they on the ground, fire wouldn't spread too far beyond that, I would hope. But it's a good point actually that we probably need to start thinking about. Yeah. Luckily, in fire season, if you like, the reed is so green that actually it's quite difficult to burn if it's standing, when it's very green anyway. But later in the season, yeah, massive fire risk. And you know, bearing in mind we burn it, you know, and it can be quite challenging. So yeah, we definitely need to think that. We're very prepared when we do that. You know, we've got buckets, beaters, and fire control, and you know. But yeah, good point. That will become more of an issue. And the other thing we're doing with droughts is we're looking into the possibility of actually having a reservoir, you know, particularly on our wet grassland sites, having a reservoir for water for our use when it does sort of disappear, and obviously making that wildlife friendly rather than, you know, on these big agricultural reservoirs. But as I said before, it will replace a triple SI bit of ground. So there's lots of toing and froing between what's right and what's good.
There was a report in the newspapers, I think last week,
Mhm.
about possible reintroduction of the Dalmatian pelican.
Yes, I saw that.
You saw it, didn't you?
Yeah, I saw
Do you
that.
have any thoughts or views about
Officially, I don't know if the RSPB has an official view.
you don't have a policy yet, Dalmatian?
No, my personal view is that there are probably, you know, there are probably other species that might be better to put money into, but I haven't looked in it in massive detail, so I can't really say. Is the next question about beavers? Yes.
When we moved to Norfolk in 1970,
Yes.
they were still hunting a few coypu.
Oh yes, yes, that's right. Yes.
Gone now. What about beavers?
So, told you. So beavers, I think, will find their way. I don't think we're going to release them. I think they'll find their own way here, either from, you know, further from Norfolk or from places like Kent. And there are lots of different areas that have beaver reintroductions, and I think there are more wild beavers now in southern England than we all think, and they travel quite far overnight on their own. They prowl, they go far. So I would be very surprised if we don't have beavers here in the next, let's say, 20 years.
What effect would they have?
So I used to work with beavers in Kent, or in an area that had a big electric fence around it. What I saw was pretty amazing in what they did. So it was on the River Stour, and the River Stour flooded a lot. So these beavers were put in, and what they did was they kind of cut channels out from the middle. It never flooded again, because the water came down, and rather than going straight down the man-made straight river, it went out, and it created a nice area of fen and willow and all the car. So the houses downstream benefited from it. From a Broads perspective, you know, they're not going to dam the river, yeah, that's for sure.
I don't see that that's the right habitat for them.
Well, I think it is. I think it is. What they would do is they'd coppice our woodlands. They would save the need for us needing to go out with the chainsaw, which would be quite handy. What they'd actually do in the bigger side, I'm not sure. I can see them creating a lot of very good habitat, but knowing the issues, let's say, between very good habitat and the right location for that good habitat, that's where the issues will lie. And that's certainly what's happened up in Scotland, I believe, as well, because they're creating good habitat, but it's in the wrong place because it's in somebody's field or that sort of thing. I think somewhere like Strumshire, they'd create lots of good habitat without being a flood risk. Coypu used to burrow through the riverbanks. That was their main issue, and that's why they needed going quickly is because they were going through the main flood defences, whereas as far as I'm aware, beavers would not do that, I think. But I think we'll see. You know, I genuinely think we'll see, because they travel far and wide, and they're always sort of on the roam for new habitats. I think once they arrive here, they'll arrive here and enjoy it. Yeah, yeah. And they were on the river there as well, weren't they, a few weeks ago? Yeah.
Right, if there's not any more questions, I'd like to thank Ben
Thank you.
for a really, really interesting talk.
Good. Thank you.